We're looking at part 5, adulthood. When we think about adulthood, we think about things that interest adults uniquely, like community involvement or politics. We think about considering our own mortality. These are things that adults think about. And at this stage with Israel, they are preoccupied with some of those very things. The books that correspond with this part from the Bible include Samuel, Kings, Chronicles, and we look a little bit at Esther and Ecclesiastes too. So in this section of Israel's history, we see that Israel is maturing. They have a fully developed faith structure, both in the law and in the temple and the worship in the temple. In Samuel, we're introduced to the monarchy that becomes the political structure of Israel for the rest of their history. And that monarchy seems to be, at least in the beginning, in conflict with the king, with the true king of Israel, God. And so Israel still wants a monarchy, even though God is their true king. And the reason given for why they want a monarch is because everyone else has one. The nation of Israel is not fully where it needs to be. They do still need to depend on God, particularly for wisdom. They're at a stage in their life where they need wisdom, and God gives them graciously through the monarchy, particularly Solomon, gives them wisdom. And this is also the section of the Bible where we have wisdom literature, where we can read Job, and where we have Ecclesiastes and Proverbs and the Psalms of David. So we have this section of Israel's history goes along with their maturing and their adulthood. And also a part of adulthood is questioning one's own mortality and looking into the future and reflecting on how it may not be full of hope. It could also be bleak. So those questions confront Israel as the monarchy breaks down and as their enemies take over and destroy the temple. This is the part of Israel's history where Israel is maturing, but also facing what could be an inevitable destruction. Israel sees Jerusalem destroyed by their enemies, sees the temple destroyed by their enemies, their center of worship, their opportunity and the availability to relate to God is destroyed. And clearly that brings to them a great deal of sadness, and they may have given up if it weren't for the prophets that were sent to them by God in this period. Prophets that gave them the message of hope despite the tragedy and destruction around them. What is particularly interesting about this section, in my opinion, is that the monarchy, God helps and anoints David. The greatest king of Israel is a part of this section of the Bible. That even though God wanted to be Israel's king, he still blessed and anointed many of the kings of Israel. Unfortunately, some of the kings of Israel were not godly, and some of them were. And in the periods where the most evil of kings reigned, God sent his prophets for Israel to listen to. Sometimes they listened, and sometimes they did not. It is a dark period in Israel's history as their enemies do defeat them. Israel is divided into two kingdoms, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. And there is a point where their enemies destroy the northern kingdom of Israel, and Israel literally ceases to exist. This is metaphorically the death of Israel as a nation. Judah survives for a little bit longer without a temple and without the whole of Israel as a kingdom. That remnant remains, and eventually their enemies do take over as well, and the remnant of Judah is scattered. And After this part of Israel's history, there is a silent 400-year, approximately, intertestamental period. It does feel like a death. And to underscore this even more, as we look forward to the next section in this book about death, we are looking at a dependence on God, a strong need for salvation and for God's help. And the prophets speak at this time of a coming Messiah and the hope that exists beyond this period of their lives. Before I end this section, I would just like to talk about the low raised high theme, because we see that quite a bit in this section of Israel's history. Remember the low raised high, a clear example of Adam, literally from the dust, to God's Son, the beginning of creation of mankind, and God reflects on his creation and says it is very good. Joseph, of course, from the pit to the palace. Moses, we have in the basket and the bulrushes, escaping death as an infant, again raised in the palace. And then we also have Samson and we have Samuel, both born of barren women and answers to their prayers. And they both become priests of God who destroy Israel's enemies. That's in this section as well. Saul is the first king of Israel, coming from the tribe of Benjamin, the last tribe of Jacob. Unfortunately, he does not rely on God as he should, and David is then anointed to replace him. David, of course, coming from a shepherd boy, rising to be the greatest king of Israel. So we see this low raised high theme again and again in this section in particular, as Israel is growing up and maturing and faced with choosing whether they will be faithful to their God or not. And if they don't, the consequences are difficult and their trials and tribulations increase. So this section of adulthood comes to an end. We will look at what comes after adulthood, preparation for the end of life, for death, in part 6.